What happens when this galaxy's most advanced civilization finally visits the world they've been calling a death planet for centuries? What they discovered about humanity will change everything you thought you knew about survival, hope, and what it truly means to be alive. This is the day Earth got its first alien visitors, and trust me, they were not prepared for what they found. Listen, I need to tell you about the day the day when the galaxy's most advanced civilization got their first real look at what we call home. Picture this Ambassador Ralek of the Zephyrian Collective standing at the observation deck of his diplomatic cruiser, staring down at our little blue marble. He's clutching his personal log recorder with 3 of his 4 hands, and let me tell you, he's not happy about this assignment. Personal log cycle 847, he whispers into the device, his voice trembling slightly. They call this place home. I call it engineered chaos. Now you have to understand something about Ralek. This guy has seen 14 different worlds. He's negotiated peace treaties on gas giants where the storms could swallow Jupiter whole. He's walked on crystal planets where a single misstep would send you falling through dimensions. But Earth has him genuinely terrified. See, 3 months ago, the Galactic Council had finally declassified our planet. For decades, we'd been listed as Class 0 Hazard Zone, Do Not Approach. Think about that for a second. We weren't just dangerous, we were so dangerous that an entire galactic civilization had collectively agreed to pretend we didn't exist. But then something changed. Humanity had started reaching out to the stars and, well, you can't ignore a species that's building faster than light engines out of pure stubbornness and coffee. So the Council made a decision. They'd send a diplomatic mission to Earth. A trust-building exercise, they called it. Ralek drew the short straw. As his ship begins its descent through our atmosphere, I can almost feel his panic through the hull. His ship's AI is going absolutely crazy. Warning lights are flashing, alarms are blaring. The computer keeps repeating the same message in that cold mechanical voice. Atmospheric composition hostile, gravity well excessive. Well, radiation levels concerning. Recommend immediate withdrawal. But Ralek can't withdraw. He's got orders from the highest levels of galactic government. So he grits his teeth, or whatever Zephyrians have, instead of teeth, and pushes forward. The landing pad they've chosen is at Andrews Air Force Base just outside Washington, D.C. As the diplomatic shuttle touches down, Ralek takes his first breath of Earth air through his environmental suit. And I kid you not, he immediately starts feeling dizzy. The oxygen concentration, he mutters into his log. It's like breathing liquid fire. That's when she appears. Dr. Ava Monroe, our State Department's new Director of Xenological Relations. Now Ava's got this interesting background. She used to be a storm chaser before she got her PhD in xenobiology. Yeah, you heard that right. While most people run away from tornadoes, Ava used to drive straight into them for fun. She steps out of a black SUV, and the first thing she does is smile. Not a diplomatic smile, mind you. A genuine, warm, welcome to the neighborhood kind of smile. She's wearing a simple blue blazer, no environmental suit, no protective gear, just breathing our liquid fire atmosphere like it's nothing. Ambassador Ralek, she calls out, walking straight toward his shuttle. Welcome to Earth. I hope your emergency pods are still working. Now that might sound like a friendly joke to you and me, but to Ralek, it's basically a death threat. Emergency pods. Why would she mention emergency pods unless she's expecting something to go horribly wrong? As Ralek steps off his shuttle surrounded by 3 other members of his diplomatic team, I can see him taking notes on everything. And I mean everything. The way the wind moves through the trees, the fact that there are birds just flying around without any apparent purpose, the way Ava's hair moves in the breeze, completely unrestrained. Tell me, Ambassador, Ava says as they walk toward the waiting vehicles. What did your briefing materials tell you about Earth? Ralek consults his datapad. Gravity 1.3 times galactic standard. Atmospheric pressure variable and unpredictable. Weather patterns characterized as chaotic. Geological instability noted across 73% of land masses. Biological diversity rated as aggressively excessive. He pauses, looking around nervously. The file was marked, approach with extreme caution. Ava laughs, and it's not a polite, diplomatic laugh. It's genuine amusement. Well, they're not wrong, but you know what they left out? What's that? We like it there, Yuhei. As they climb into the SUV, Ralek notices something that makes him even more nervous. The vehicle has no environmental seals, no protective barriers. The windows are actually open, letting in that hostile atmosphere. And Ava, she's just sitting there breathing it in like she's at a spa. First stop, Ava announces as the convoy pulls away from the base. We're going to show you where we live. Now Ralek is expecting to see some kind of underground bunker complex, maybe a series of reinforced domes, something that makes sense for a species trying to survive on a death world. Instead, they drive through suburban Virginia, houses with white picket fences, kids playing in sprinklers on their front lawns, people walking dogs, jogging, mowing their grass. This is your primary settlement, Ralek asks, his voice barely above a whisper. Oh no, Ava replies casually. This is just where some of us choose to live. We've got settlements pretty much everywhere. Mountains, deserts, islands, polar regions. Couple of research stations on the ocean floor. We're not really picky about location. One of the other aliens in the group, a crystalline being called Thexara, leans forward. But the environmental hazards. How do you protect your young? Ava points out the window at a playground where human children are running around screaming with joy as they climb on metal structures that would probably be considered torture devices on most civilized worlds. We don't really protect them, she says. We teach them. The convoy stops at a scenic overlook in the Blue Ridge Mountains. As they get out of the vehicles, Ralek immediately starts checking his environmental readings again. The altitude, the air pressure, the temperature variations. Everything's within what his equipment considers survivable, but just barely. And Ava walks to the edge of the overlook. No safety barriers, no protective equipment, and just stands there looking out over the valley below. Beautiful, isn't it? Ralek joins her, but he stays well back from the edge. From up here, he can see for miles. Rolling green hills, rivers winding through forests, clouds casting shadows that move across the landscape like living things. It is, he admits reluctantly, but it's also incredibly dangerous. The geological surveys show this entire region is seismically active. The weather patterns are completely unpredictable, and the biological complexity, he shudders. Yeah, Ava agrees. That's what makes it home. As they stand there, a red-tailed hawk circles overhead, riding the thermal currents with effortless grace. Ralek watches it with fascination and horror. That creature, he says, it's flying without any technological assistance. Yep, been doing it for millions of years. But if it falls, then it dies. Ava's voice is matter-of-fact, not cruel. That's why it doesn't fall. As they head back to the vehicles, Ralek makes another entry in his personal log, his voice thoughtful now instead of terrified. Personal log supplemental. The humans appear to have developed alongside their hostile environment rather than in spite of it. Initial hypothesis that they are not victims of their world's dangers. They are products of them. But even as he's starting to understand, Ralek has no idea what's coming next. Because Ava's just getting started. She's about to show him things that will challenge everything he thought he knew about survival adaptation and what it truly means to be alive. Ready for the real tour? She asks as they climb back into the SUV. Ralek closes his eyes and tries to center himself. I suppose I have no choice. Oh, you always have a choice, Ambassador. That's the first thing you need to understand about being human. And with that, they drive off into what Ralek will later describe in his official report, the most terrifying and enlightening day of my diplomatic career. Little does he know the real surprises haven't even started yet. So there they are, driving through what Ralek thinks is going to be a peaceful introduction to human civilization. Boy, is he wrong. Ava's gotten this gleam in her eye, the kind of look that should have warning sirens attached to it. She leans forward and taps the driver on the shoulder. Change of plans, Marcus. Take us to the storm center. Ma'am, the driver responds, we've got a Category 2 developing over the Chesapeake. You sure about this? And here's where I need you to understand something about Ava. When most people hear Category 2 hurricane, they think evacuation time. When Ava hears it, she thinks field trip opportunity. Perfect timing, she says with that smile again. Ralek doesn't speak in English perfectly, but he understands enough to know something's wrong. Storm center, he asks his translator, struggling with the concept. You have a facility for studying meteorological phenomena. Oh, we study them all right, Ava replies, up close and personal. The convoy changes direction, heading east toward the coast. As they drive, I can see Ralek getting more and more agitated. His environmental sensors are going crazy, barometric pressure dropping, wind speeds increasing, electromagnetic disturbances in the atmosphere. Deputy Monroe, he says, trying to keep his voice up to Betty. My instruments are detecting severe atmospheric instability ahead. Perhaps we should postpone this portion of the tour. Ava checks her phone. Nah, we're good. The eyewall won't make landfall for another 3 hours. Plenty of time. Eyewall Thexara, the crystalline alien, practically vibrates with terror. You're driving toward the center of an atmospheric disturbance. Well, how else are you going to see it? Now here's something you need to know about galactic civilization. Most species, when they encounter dangerous weather, they hide. They go underground. They activate force fields. They evacuate entire continents if necessary. The idea of voluntarily approaching a hurricane is so fundamentally alien to them that their translators don't even have words for it. As they get closer to the coast, the signs of the approaching storm become obvious. Trees bending in the wind. Emergency vehicles racing past them. News crews setting up equipment on elevated platforms. The emergency responders, Ralek observes, they're not evacuating the area. Nope, Ava confirms. They're getting ready to help people who didn't leave in time. And the news crews, live coverage, people like to watch. I can practically hear Ralek's worldview cracking. On his home planet, when a storm approaches, everyone takes shelter and waits for it to pass. Here, humans are literally broadcasting it for entertainment. They pull into the parking lot of the National Weather Service's Storm Prediction Center, and I kid you not, there's a food truck parked right outside. A food truck during a hurricane warning. Best fish tacos on the East Coast, Ava explains as they walk past it. Jake never misses a storm. Inside the facility, it's controlled chaos. Meteorologists are tracking the storm's path on massive screens. Radar images show a swirling mass of destruction heading straight for them. And everyone, and I mean everyone, looks excited. Dr. Monroe calls out a young meteorologist with coffee-stained clothes and wild hair. Perfect timing. We've got some beautiful spiral band development. The mesocyclone structure is textbook perfect. Anything dangerous, Ava asks. Oh, absolutely. We're looking at sustained winds of 105 miles per hour, storm surge up to 12 feet, and the tornado potential is off the charts. Excellent. Can we get the ambassador and his team up to the observation deck? Now, Ralek has been trying to process what he's hearing, but when he hears observation deck, he finally snaps. Observation deck. His voice cracks. You want us to observe this phenomenon from an elevated position during active wind speeds that could literally tear us apart. The meteorologist looks confused. The building's rated for Category 5. We'll be fine. Fine. Thexara's crystalline structure is literally resonating with fear. You consider exposure to destructive atmospheric forces to be fine. Well, yeah. How else are you going to study them? As they head up to the observation deck, I can hear Ralek muttering into his personal log. Personal log addendum. The humans don't just live with their hostile environment. They study it. They seek it out. They enjoy it. The observation deck is essentially a reinforced glass box sticking out from the side of the building. From here, you can see the storm approaching across the water. The sky is this ominous green-black color, and the clouds are moving in ways that would make a physics professor cry. There she is, Ava says with genuine affection in her voice, like she's introducing them to an old friend. Isn't she beautiful, beautiful? She called a Category 2 hurricane beautiful. Ralek stares out at the approaching wall of destruction. Lightning is flickering inside the storm clouds like broken neon signs. The wind is already strong enough that debris is flying past the windows. And there's Ava practically pressed against the glass, taking pictures with her phone. Dr. Monroe, he says carefully, on my world, when we encounter destructive weather phenomena, we seek shelter in our deepest underground facilities. Yeah, we do that too sometimes. But where's the fun in that? Fun. The word comes out as barely a whisper. That's when the first real gust hits the building. The entire structure sways slightly, and I can see every alien in the group tense up. Their instincts are screaming at them to run, to hide, to get as far away from this death trap as possible. But the humans are getting more excited. Ooh, feel that, says the meteorologist. We're getting some serious wind shear now. The updraft velocities must be incredible. Can we get readings on the pressure differential? Ava asks. Already on it. We're seeing some fascinating microclimate development in the spiral bands. Rallick turns to stare at her. You're taking scientific measurements during an active catastrophic weather event. Best time to get accurate data. Outside, the rain starts hitting the windows like machine gun fire. The wind is howling now, a sound that goes right through you and makes every survival instinct you've ever had start screaming. Lightning strikes so close that the thunder is instantaneous, shaking the entire building. And then Ava does something that almost gives Rallick a heart attack. She opens a small panel in the wall and extends a weather monitoring device outside. "What are you doing?" he shouts over the noise. "Getting direct readings from inside the storm. How else are you going to get accurate data?" The device lasts about 30 seconds before the wind rips it away, but Ava just shrugs and makes notes on her tablet. "Wind speed just hit 112 miles per hour, she announces cheerfully. "We're officially in Category 3 territory now." That's when Thexara makes a sound I can only describe as a crystalline scream. "You're measuring how much more dangerous it's getting." "Well, yeah, that's science." The storm reaches its peak intensity right overhead. The building is shaking constantly now. The lights flicker on and off. Rain is coming down so hard it sounds like standing inside a waterfall. And through it all, the humans are calmly taking measurements, making observations, and discussing the storm's structure like it's a mildly interesting academic exercise. "Look at that rotation," the meteorologist points out. "Textbook mesocyclone development." "The pressure gradient is fascinating," Ava adds. "We're seeing some really unique atmospheric dynamics." Rallick realizes something that shakes him to his core. They're not just surviving this storm, they're studying it, learning from it, and they're doing it while standing directly in its path. "Personal log, urgent addendum," he whispers into his recorder. The humans don't hide from their world's dangers. They analyze them, they measure them, they turn catastrophic destruction into educational opportunities. As the eye of the storm passes overhead, there's a sudden eerie calm. The wind stops. The rain lightens to a gentle drizzle. And in that moment of peace, Ava turns to address her alien guests. "This is the eye," she explains. "We've got about 20 minutes before the back wall hits, and it gets rough again." "Rough again?" Rallick's voice is barely functional at this point. The backside of a hurricane is usually worse than the front. More tornadoes, heavier rain, stronger winds. And we're staying here for that too. "Oh, absolutely. That's when you get the best data." As they stand there in the temporary calm, looking out at the destruction already visible below, Rallick makes an observation that will change how he thinks about humanity forever. "You're not victims of this world," he says quietly. "You're partners with it." Ava looks at him with something like respect. Now you're starting to get it. But even as Rallick thinks he's beginning to understand these impossible humans, he has no idea what's coming next. Because the weather, as terrifying as it is just the beginning. Ava's already planning their next stop, and trust me, it's going to make a Category 3 hurricane look like a gentle spring shower. You know what's funny about surviving a hurricane most species would call? It'd call it a day after that. Pack up, go home, maybe write a strongly worded report about how humans are clearly insane. But not Ava. Oh no, she's just getting warmed up. As they're driving away from the storm center with debris still flying around, and emergency crews cleaning up the aftermath, Ava turns to Rallick with that same terrifying smile. "So how do you feel about animals?" Now Rallick has studied xenobiology. He knows about Earth's biodiversity. But there's a difference between reading about something in an academic paper and actually encountering it face to face. He's about to learn that difference the hard way. "Animals," he asked cautiously. "Your planet's biological diversity is noted in our files as aggressively excessive." "Yeah, that's putting it mildly. We've got about 8.7 million different species sharing this rock with us." Thexara's crystalline structure dims with shock. 8.7 million. My entire world has maybe 300 species total. Different evolutionary pressures. Ava explains casually. When everything's trying to kill everything else, life gets creative. They pull up to the National Zoo in Washington, D.C., and I have to tell you, Relic's environmental sensors are going absolutely berserk. His suit is detecting thousands of different biological signatures, chemical compounds. He's never encountered pheromones and toxins that don't exist anywhere else in the known galaxy. Dr. Monroe, he says, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. My instruments are detecting numerous potentially lethal biological agents in the immediate vicinity. Well, those are just the animals. The animals are producing lethal biological agents. Some of them, don't worry, we've got protocols. As they walk through the entrance, they pass a group of human children on a field trip. Kids may be 8 or 9 years old, chattering excitedly about which animals they want to see. And here's what gets me. They're not wearing any protective gear. No environmental suits, no chemical filters, nothing. The juveniles, Ralik observes, they appear to be completely unprotected. Yeah, field trips are fun. Fun. They're exposing their young to unknown biological hazards for entertainment. How else are they going to learn? Their first stop is the insect house. And let me tell you, this is where things get really interesting. The moment they walk in, every alien in the group freezes. Not because they're scared, but because their survival instincts have literally shut down their higher brain functions. These are some of our smaller species, Ava announces cheerfully, gesturing toward a display case full of what looks like nightmare fuel. Inside the case, there's a tarantula the size of a dinner plate casually molting its skin like it's changing clothes. Next to it, a colony of carpenter ants is busily dismantling a piece of wood with military precision. And in the corner, a praying mantis is methodically devouring something that used to be a cricket. They're beautiful, Ava says with genuine admiration. Ralik stares at the tarantula. That creature could kill me. Actually, no. Charlotte there is pretty harmless. Her bite might sting a bit, but she's not venomous enough to hurt a human. Not venomous enough. The words come out as a strangled whisper. You're saying it is venomous, but not sufficiently so to be concerned? Right. Now, if you want to see something really dangerous, she leads them to another display case, and I swear Thexara actually takes a step backward. Inside is what looks like an innocent little frog, bright blue, with black spots sitting peacefully on a leaf. This is a poison dart frog, Ava explains. One of our more chemically gifted species. You see, chemically gifted, the toxins on its skin could kill about 10 adult humans. There's a long moment of silence as this information sinks in. And you keep it here, Ralik says slowly, for people to look at. Educational purposes, kids love the poison exhibit. You show lethal toxins to children. How else are they going to learn about biochemistry? As they move through the insect house, Ava keeps up a running commentary that sounds like a serial killer shopping list, like bullet ants with stings that feel like being shot, black widow spiders with neurotoxins that shut down nervous systems, Africanized honeybees that attack in coordinated swarms. The fascinating thing about our insects, she explains, is how they've evolved such diverse survival strategies. Chemical warfare, coordinated attacks, mimicry, parasitism. Thexara's voice is barely audible. Oh yeah, we've got some great parasites. There's this wasp that lays its eggs inside other insects while they're still alive. The larvae eat the host from the inside out, keeping it alive as long as possible to maintain freshness. Ralik stops walking. You're describing biological horror. I'm describing nature. They move on to the mammal exhibits, and honestly, I thought the insects were bad. But mammals are where Earth really shows off. First up, the big cats. As they approach the lion enclosure, Ralik can hear the low rumble of purring from inside the habitat. It sounds peaceful enough until you realize that the purring is coming from a 400-pound predator with teeth designed specifically for crushing windpipes. This is Aslan, Ava says, pointing to a massive male lion lounging in the shade. He's actually pretty mellow. That creature, Ralik whispers, could tear me apart with its bare claws. Oh, absolutely. Lions are apex predators. But Aslan here is well-fed and content, so he's not interested in hunting. Well-fed. What do you feed it? Other animals mostly. beef, horse meat, sometimes deer. The casual way she says it makes Raleigh realize something profound. Humans don't just coexist with deadly predators they feed them. They take care of them. They study them with the same affection most species reserve for their own offspring. Next, they visit the aquatic section, and this is where things get really surreal. There's a tank full of jellyfish drifting through the water like alien ghosts, their translucent bodies pulsing with ethereal beauty. These are box jellyfish, Ava explains. Absolutely gorgeous creatures. They appear benign, Raleigh observes. Oh, they're not. Those tentacles carry enough venom to kill a human in about 4 minutes. 4 minutes. Yeah, it's pretty fast acting. Causes excruciating pain, cardiac arrest, and paralysis. But look at how they move. It's like underwater ballet. I can see Raleigh struggling to process this. Beauty and death existing in the same organism, and humans appreciating both aspects equally. But the real kicker comes when they reach the Australian exhibit. Ava stops in front of a small, unassuming enclosure that looks almost empty. This is one of my personal favorites, she says, Business. Bush-ringed octopus. Inside the tank, barely visible among the rocks and coral, is a small octopus about the size of a golf ball. It looks harmless enough until it suddenly flashes bright blue rings across its skin. Beautiful warning coloration, Ava notes appreciatively. Warning. Oh yeah, it's telling us it's irritated. When they do that, it means they're ready to bite. And the bite is fatal, no known antidote. Causes complete paralysis within minutes, but you stay conscious the whole time until you suffocate. Raleigh stares at the tiny creature in horror. That small organism can kill you. Yep, contains enough venom to kill 26 adult humans. 26. That's why we respect the warning colors. As they continue through the exhibits, the pattern becomes clear. Every single organism they encounter is either poisonous, venomous, capable of crushing bones, or equipped with some other method of delivering death with extreme efficiency. And the humans, they're absolutely fascinated by all of it. Dr. Monroe Raleigh finally asks, how do you sleep at night knowing you share your world with all of these lethal organisms? Ava thinks about this for a moment. You know what's funny? They're not trying to kill us. They're just trying to survive, same as we are. The venom, the claws, the teeth, they're not weapons of aggression. They're tools of survival. But surely you take precautions. Of course, we study them, we understand them, we respect them, but we don't fear them. That's when they reach the final exhibit, and I have to admit, this is where even I would probably draw the line. It's the reptile house, and specifically the Australian inland taipan exhibit. Now this, Ava says, with obvious admiration, is the world's most venomous snake. The snake in question is coiled peacefully in its habitat, looking for all the world like an ordinary brown snake. Nothing particularly intimidating about it except for the small placard that reads, "Warning, extremely dangerous, do not disturb." How venomous? Thexara asks, though I'm not sure she really wants to know. One bite contains enough venom to kill 100 adult humans. 100? Yup, and it acts fast. You'd have maybe 30 minutes before she makes a cutting gesture across her throat. Raleigh is quiet for a long moment, just staring at the snake. Finally, he speaks. Personal log critical observation. The humans don't just survive alongside these organisms. They study them. They care for them. They admire them. That's right, Ava confirms. Every one of these animals has something to teach us. About chemistry, about evolution, about survival strategies we never would have thought of on our own. But why preserve them? Why not eliminate the dangerous ones? Ava looks at him like he suggested burning down a library. Because they're part of our world. They made us who we are. Without predators, we never would have developed our reflexes. Without venomous creatures, we never would have learned about antidotes and toxicology. Without parasites, we never would have developed our immune systems. As they're leaving the zoo, Raleigh makes one final observation that I think captures the whole experience perfectly. You don't just live with danger, he says. You cultivate it. We cultivate everything, Ava replies. The beautiful and the deadly, the helpful and the harmful. It's all part of the same ecosystem, and we're all part of each other. But as they're walking back to the parking lot, Ava gets that look again, that gleam in her eye that means she's got something even more intense planned. Ready to see what all this biological diversity has done to us? She asks. And I can tell you right now, Rallick is definitely not ready. Because if he thinks Earth's creatures are impressive, wait until he sees what living alongside them has done to the human body and mind. Now, if you thought Rallick was having a hard time processing Earth's wildlife, you should see his face when Ava announces their next destination. Walter Reed Medical Center, she says as they climb back into the SUV. Time to see what living on a death world has done to our bodies. I can see Rallick's shoulders slump. At this point, he's probably thinking that humans are going to show him some kind of medical horror show. Maybe bodies ravaged by all those toxins and venoms they've been casually discussing. He's not wrong, but he's also not right. Because what he's about to see isn't damage, it's adaptation. Dr. Sarah Chen meets them at the hospital entrance. She's the head of the comparative physiology department. And let me tell you, she's got this enthusiasm for human biology that borders on the obsessive. Ambassador Rallick, she says, shaking his hand with enough force to make him wince. I've been looking forward to this. We've never had the chance to explain human physiology to a galactic audience before. Explain, Rallick asked cautiously. Oh yes. See, most species assume that because we live on such a dangerous world, we must be somehow damaged or weakened by it. But it's exactly the opposite. She leads them into the medical center, past rooms full of humans in various states of recovery. And here's what's weird. They all look surprisingly healthy for people who supposedly live on a death world. First thing you need to understand, Dr. Chen explains as they walk, is that the human body is essentially a survival machine that's been fine-tuned by millions of years of evolutionary pressure. They stop at a display showing comparative anatomy between humans and other galactic species. I can see Rallick studying the diagrams with growing confusion. Your bone density, he observes, it's nearly double the galactic average. Yep, comes from living in high gravity with active predators. We needed bones that could handle impact stress and wouldn't break easily when we were running for our lives. And your muscle fiber composition, optimized for both endurance and explosive power. We're persistence hunters, but we also needed to be able to sprint when something was chasing us. Dr. Chen pulls up a holographic display of the human cardiovascular system. This is where it gets really interesting. See this? She points to the heart, which is pumping away in the display with steady, powerful beats. Your cardiac output is exceptional. Thexara note, much higher than necessary for basic survival. That's because basic survival wasn't enough. We needed to be able to maintain high-intensity activity for extended periods. Running, fighting, climbing, swimming. Our hearts are basically high-performance engines. But the real surprise comes when Dr. Chen starts talking about human recovery capabilities. This is Marcus, she says, introducing them to a man sitting in a wheelchair. 3 months ago, he was in a motorcycle accident, broke his back in 4 places, shattered his pelvis, and had massive internal bleeding. Rallick stares at Marcus in horror. He should be dead. Yeah, probably, Marcus agrees cheerfully, but here I am. The human healing factor, Dr. Chen explains, is unlike anything else we've encountered in the galaxy. We don't just recover from injuries, we often come back stronger than before. She shows them Marcus's x-rays. I can see the fracture lines where his bones were completely shattered, but I can also see where they've healed back together, creating structures that are actually thicker and stronger than the original bones. Wolff's Law, Dr. Chen says, bones adapt to the stresses placed on them. Break a human bone and it heals back stronger to prevent the same injury from happening again. But the neurological damage, Rallick protests. Watch this, Marcus says. He pushes himself up from the wheelchair and takes a few steps using a walker. Doc says I'll be walking normally within 6 months, maybe even running again by next year. Impossible. Spinal injuries of that severity are permanent. Not for humans, Dr. Chen says. Our nervous system has remarkable plasticity. Neural pathways can reroute themselves around damaged areas. It's like having built-in redundancy systems. They move to the next display, which shows human sensory capabilities. And this is where things get really impressive. Your reaction times, Rallick notes studying the data. They're extraordinary. Had to be. When you're sharing your world with creatures that can kill you in seconds, you develop really good reflexes. Dr. Chen demonstrates by having one of the medical students participate in a reaction test. A ball drops from a randomized height, and the student has to catch it. He succeeds easily multiple times in a row. Average human reaction time is about 250 milliseconds, she explains. But under stress, we can get that down to about 150 milliseconds. Some athletes can go even faster. And your pain tolerance, Thexara adds, looking at another display? That's one of my favorite topics, Dr. Chen says with a grin that reminds me uncomfortably of Ava's smile. Humans have the ability to essentially turn off pain when necessary. She shows them footage of human athletes continuing to compete with injuries that should have been debilitating. A soccer player finishing a match with a broken leg, a marathon runner completing the race with stress fractures in both feet, a rock climber ascending a cliff face with a dislocated shoulder. This is madness, Rolak whispers. This is adrenaline, Dr. Chen corrects. Our bodies produce a cocktail of chemicals that can override pain signals, increase strength, improve focus, and accelerate healing. It's like having a built-in combat drug system. Combat drug system. Well, what would you call it? In a life-or-death situation, humans can temporarily access physical capabilities that exceed our normal limitations. She shows them documented cases of hysterical strength. A mother lifting a car off her trapped child. A man carrying 2 unconscious people out of a burning building. A teenager holding a collapsing beam in place long enough for others to escape. These feats, Ralik says, studying the data, they should be physically impossible given your muscle mass and bone structure. Under normal circumstances, yes, but humans don't operate under normal circumstances. We operate under survival circumstances. The next part of the tour takes them to the Psychological Evaluation Center. And honestly, this is where I think Ralik's worldview completely breaks down. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez, the chief psychologist, greets them with a warm smile. Ready to explore the human mind. I'm not sure I am, Ralik admits. Don't worry, it's not as scary as it sounds. Well, actually, it kind of is, but in a good way. She leads them into a room where several humans are participating in what looks like therapy sessions. But as I listen to what they're discussing, I realize these aren't typical therapy sessions. This is our trauma recovery program, Dr. Rodriguez explains. These individuals have all survived experiences that would psychologically destroy most galactic species. One woman is talking about surviving a plane crash. Another man is describing how he escaped from a collapsed mine. A third person is explaining how she survived being lost in the Amazon rainforest for 3 weeks. But they seem, Ralik struggles for the words, healthy, functional, happy even. Dr. Rodriguez nods. That's post-traumatic growth. Humans don't just recover from psychological trauma, we often become stronger because of it. Indeed, stronger. Trauma teaches us things about ourselves that we never would have learned otherwise. Our capacity for survival, our ability to adapt, our willingness to help others. Many of our greatest leaders, artists, and innovators are people who've overcome significant adversity. She shows them brain scans comparing humans who've experienced trauma with those who haven't. The differences are remarkable. See these neural pathways. She points to highlighted areas of the brain. These are connections that only develop in response to extreme stress. They're like psychological muscle memory. Once you've survived something terrible, your brain literally rewires itself to be better prepared for future challenges. You're saying that surviving trauma makes humans more capable. Not just more capable, more resilient, more creative, more empathetic. Trauma survivors often develop what we call existential flexibility. They're better at adapting to changing circumstances because they've already proven to themselves that they can survive the unthinkable. But the real mind-bender comes when Dr. Rodriguez starts talking about human entertainment. Want to know something really interesting about human psychology? She asks. We seek out stress. Seek out stress is horror movies, extreme sports, roller coasters, haunted houses. We literally pay money to be frightened, to feel our hearts race, to experience controlled danger. She shows them footage of humans engaging in activities that would terrify most galactic species. Bungee jumping, skydiving, cave diving, mountain climbing. People voluntarily throwing themselves off cliffs with nothing but a stretchy cord attached to their ankles. This is recreational, Thexara asks in a voice barely above a whisper. Oh, absolutely. We call it thrill-seeking. It's how we train our stress response systems during peacetime. Oh, you train for stress. How else are you going to be ready when real danger shows up? As they're leaving the medical center, Ralek pulls Dr. Chen aside for a private conversation. Doctor, I need to ask you something directly. Are humans normal? Dr. Chen considers this for a moment. Define normal. Are you a typical example of evolution on a hostile world? Or are you an anomaly? Ambassador, I've studied comparative biology for 20 years. I've analyzed data from hundreds of different worlds and species. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that humans are not normal. Ralek's expression shows both relief and terror. We're not normal, she continues, because normal species don't survive on worlds like Earth. Normal species either go extinct or they leave. But humans, we stayed. We adapted. We thrived. And in the process, we became something that doesn't exist anywhere else in the galaxy. What's that? Survivors by choice rather than necessity. Most species develop survival traits because they have to. Humans develop them because we want to see what we're capable of. As they walk back to the convoy, Ava turns to Ralek with a question that I can tell has been building up all day. So, Ambassador, what do you think so far? Ralek is quiet for a long moment, just processing everything he's seen and heard. Personal log final entry for this cycle, he says into his recorder. The humans are not what we expected. They are not victims of their environment. They are not damaged by their world's hostility. They are enhanced by it. But even as he's starting to understand the true nature of humanity, Ralek has no idea that the most important part of the tour is still ahead. Because all of this physical and psychological capability, impressive as it is just preparation for what humans do when they're pushed to their absolute limits. The sun is setting as their convoy winds its way up a narrow mountain road outside the city. Ralek has been unusually quiet since leaving the medical center, and I can tell his mind is working overtime, trying to process everything he's witnessed. Where are we going now? He finally asks. Ava checks her watch. Somewhere we can talk without distractions. You've seen a lot today, and I think you probably have questions. The road leads to what locals call Silent Hill, though it's not actually silent. It's just peaceful in a way that most places on Earth aren't. No hurricanes, no deadly animals, no medical emergencies, just a grassy hilltop overlooking the Potomac Valley with the lights of Washington, D.C. twinkling in the distance like fallen stars. As they get out of the vehicles, Ralek immediately starts taking environmental readings again. Force of habit at this point, I guess. Atmospheric composition normal, he mutters. No immediate biological threats detected. Seismic activity minimal. Disappointed, Ava asks with a slight smile. Confused, he admits. This location appears to be genuinely safe. It is. That's why I brought you here. They walk to the edge of the overlook where someone has thoughtfully placed a few benches. The view is spectacular. Rolling hills stretch out in every direction, dotted with small towns whose lights are just beginning to flicker on as darkness approaches. It's beautiful, Thexara says, and for the first time all day, she sounds relaxed. This used to be a battlefield, Ava says quietly. Civil war. About 160 years ago, thousands of men died right where we're standing. The peaceful moment shatters like glass. Of course it would, Ralek says with bitter resignation. Even your places of beauty are built on death. Not built on death, Ava corrects. Built from death. There's a difference. She sits down on one of the benches and gestures for the others to join her. As they settle in, I can see Ralek struggling with something. Finally, he speaks. Dr. Monroe, I need to ask you something directly, and I need you to answer honestly. Shoot, what are you really planning? The question hangs in the air like a challenge. Ava doesn't answer immediately. Instead, she looks out over the valley, watching the lights grow brighter as full darkness settles over the landscape. What do you think we're planning? She asks him finally. Expansion, conquest. Your species has demonstrated capabilities that frankly terrify most of the galactic community. You survive in conditions that would kill us. You thrive on adversity. You turn trauma into strength and danger into entertainment. And now you're reaching for the stars. Ralek pauses, then continues with the weight of someone delivering a formal accusation. The logical conclusion is that humanity represents an existential threat to galactic civilization. You're not just another species looking to join the community, you're predators. There's a long silence. Somewhere in the distance, an owl calls out a sound that would probably terrify most aliens, but seems perfectly natural here. You know what's funny, Ava says eventually. That's exactly what we were afraid you'd think. Afraid? Terrified, actually. Do you have any idea what it's like to be the only species in the galaxy that everyone else considers a monster? She turns to face Rulek directly, and I can see something in her expression that I haven't seen all day. Vulnerability. Every message we sent into space, every signal we broadcast, every probe we launched, we knew there was a chance that whoever received it would decide we were too dangerous to be allowed to exist. And yet you kept sending them, because the alternative was staying alone forever. Ava stands up and walks to the edge of the overlook, her silhouette framed against the star-filled sky. You want to know what we're really planning? Ambassador, we're planning to prove that we belong. Belong. In the galactic community, among civilized species, we know we're different, we know we're dangerous, but we also know that we have something to offer. What could you possibly offer that would outweigh the threat you represent? Ava turns back to them, and now I can see tears in her eyes. Not tears of sadness, but tears of frustration and longing. Hope. The word falls into the silence like a stone into still water. Hope, Rulek repeats. Ambassador, in all your studies of galactic civilization, how many species have you encountered that chose to survive impossible odds rather than accept defeat? Rulek considers this. Very few. Most species either adapt their environment to suit their needs or they relocate to more suitable worlds. Right, they find the easy way. They take the path of least resistance. But what happens when there is no easy way? What happens when the environment can't be adapted and there's nowhere else to go? They perish. Exactly. They give up. They accept extinction as inevitable. Ava's voice is gaining strength now, becoming passionate. But humans, we look at impossible odds and we say, watch this. She gestures toward the lights of the city below her. Every one of those lights represents someone who refused to give up. Someone whose ancestors faced saber-toothed tigers and ice ages and plagues and wars and natural disasters, and instead of lying down to die, they figured out how to fight back. But the cost, the cost has been enormous. We've lost billions of people over the millennia. We've suffered through horrors that would break most species permanently. But we've also learned something that no other species in the galaxy has learned. What's that? That survival isn't just about staying alive, it's about staying human. Rulek frowns. I don't understand. Ava sits back down, leaning forward intently. When other species face extinction-level threats, they focus on preserving their genetic material, their technology, their basic survival. They're willing to sacrifice everything else, including what made them who they were in the first place. That seems logical. But humans, we refuse to let go of the things that make us human. Love, art, music, stories, dreams, hope. Even when we're dying, even when we're facing impossible odds, we still fall in love. We still create beauty. We still laugh at stupid jokes and cry at sad movies and help strangers who can't possibly help us back. She pauses, wiping away a tear. That's what we're offering the Galaxy Ambassador. The knowledge that you don't have to choose between survival and staying true to who you are. That you can face the impossible and come through it not just alive, but still yourself. Thek's aura speaks up for the first time in a while. But surely there are limits to what even humans can endure. Are there? Ava asks. I showed you our world today. I showed you the things that should have killed us, the challenges that should have driven us extinct. And instead of being destroyed by them, we turn them into strengths. So what happens? Rulek asks slowly. When humanity faces a challenge it can't overcome. Ava smiles, and this time it's not the confident saying I've been seeing all day. It's something softer, sadder, but also infinitely more determined. Then we'll die trying. But we'll die as humans, not as some pale shadow of what we used to be. The group falls silent again, but this time it's a different kind of silence. Not uncomfortable, but contemplative. Finally, Rulek speaks, his voice barely above a whisper. Personal log addendum. I came to Earth expecting to evaluate a potential threat to galactic security. Instead, I have encountered something I never expected to find. What's that? Ava asked. Teachers. The word hangs in the air between them like a bridge. You're not conquerors, he continues. You're not predators. You're educators. You're showing the galaxy what's possible when a species refuses to surrender its essential nature in the face of impossible odds. Is that good or bad? Rollick looks out over the valley where the lights continue to twinkle in the darkness like promises of tomorrow. I don't know yet, he admits, but I'm beginning to think it might be the most important thing that's ever happened to galactic civilization. As they prepare to head back down the mountain, Ava places her hand on a small memorial plaque near the bench. It's dedicated to the soldiers who died on this hill over a century ago. They fought and died for an idea, she says quietly, the idea that all people should be free. Most of them never lived to see that dream become reality, but they died believing it was possible. And now we're fighting for a bigger idea, the idea that all species can be free from the fear that survival requires surrender, free to face the future as themselves, not as pale shadows of what they used to be. Rollick nods slowly. And if you fail? Ava looks up at the stars where somewhere among them, the rest of galactic civilization waits to judge humanity's worthiness. Then at least we'll have tried, and maybe that will be enough to inspire someone else to keep trying after we're gone. As they walk back to the vehicles, I can see that something fundamental has changed in Rollick's demeanor. The fear is still there, but it's mixed with something else now. Something that looks almost like hope. But the night isn't over yet. Ava has one more revelation waiting, and this one is going to change everything Rollick thinks he knows about humanity's place in the universe. The ride back to the spaceport is different from the morning's journey. The convoy moves through empty highways under a canopy of stars, and inside the lead vehicle nobody speaks. But it's not the uncomfortable silence of earlier. It's the quiet of people processing something profound. Rollick sits with his personal recorder clutched in his hands, but he hasn't spoken into it for the past hour. His three companions are equally subdued, each lost in their own thoughts about everything they've witnessed. As they approach the landing pad, where his diplomatic shuttle waits gleaming under the floodlights, like a silver promise of home, Rollick finally breaks the silence. Dr. Monroe, may I ask you one final question? Of course. When you wake up tomorrow morning, what will you do? Ava seems surprised by the question. Go to work, I suppose. We've got 3 more diplomatic missions scheduled this month. The Centaurian delegation arrives on Wednesday, and the vegan trade representatives are coming next week. More tours like today. Probably not as intense. Most species aren't as concerned about our capabilities as the Zephyrian Collective has been. Rollick nods thoughtfully. And what will you show them? Depends on what they need to see, and the Centaurians are interested in our agricultural techniques. The vegans want to understand our manufacturing processes. Normal things. Normal for us. As they pull up beside the shuttle, Rollick doesn't immediately get out. Instead, he stares through the window at his vessel, this marvel of galactic engineering that brought him safely across the void between stars. Do you know what strikes me as most remarkable about today? He asks. What's that? Everything you showed me, all the dangers and adaptations and impossibilities, you presented them as if they were perfectly ordinary. They are ordinary for us. But they're not ordinary, Dr. Monroe. They're miraculous. Ava considers this. I suppose they are. We just don't think about it that way. Why not? Because if we spent all our time marveling at how impossible our existence is, we'd never get anything done. As Rollick finally steps out of the vehicle, he's joined by his 3 companions. They stand together in the pool of light cast by the Shuttle 4 beings from a distant world, trying to make sense of what they have experienced. Ambassador, Ava says, extending her hand for a final handshake. Thank you for coming. I know this wasn't what you expected. No, he agrees, taking her hand. It wasn't. But instead of immediately boarding his shuttle, Rollick does something unexpected. He turns to address not just Ava, but the small crowd of human technicians and security personnel who have gathered to see them off. People of Earth, he says, his voice carrying across the landing pad with formal dignity. I came here today as a representative of the Zephyrian Collective, tasked with evaluating humanity's potential impact on galactic civilization. A murmur runs through the crowd, but Raleigh continues. I expected to find a species shaped by their hostile environment into something brutal and unforgiving. Instead, I found something far more dangerous. The murmur stops. Everyone is listening now. I found hope made manifest. I found a species that refuses to surrender its essential nature regardless of the challenges it faces. I found teachers who don't even realize they're teaching. He pauses, looking around at the assembled humans. You terrify us because you represent something we thought was impossible. You prove that survival and compassion are not mutually exclusive, that strength and gentleness can coexist, that a species can face extinction and emerge not just alive, but more human than ever. Ava is smiling now, but I can see tears in her eyes again. I will return to my people with a recommendation that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Council, not as junior partners to be supervised, but as equals to be respected. The crowd erupts in cheers, but Raleigh raises a hand for silence. But more than that, I will recommend that we establish educational exchange programs. Because my people, and frankly most of galactic civilization, have forgotten something that you never forgot. What's that? Someone calls out. That survival without hope is not survival at all. It's just delayed extinction. As Raleigh boards his shuttle, he pauses at the entrance and turns back one final time. Dr. Monroe, you asked what I would do when I return home. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to recommend that every species in the galaxy send representatives to Earth, not to study your technology or your military capabilities, but to remember what it means to be truly alive. The shuttle door closes, and within minutes, the craft lifts off into the night sky, carrying Raleigh and his companions back toward the stars. But the story doesn't end there. 3 months later, Ava receives a transmission from the Zephyrian homeworld. It's a personal message from Raleigh, and what he has to say changes everything. Dr. Monroe, this is Ambassador Raleigh. I wanted to give you an update on the impact of my report to the Galactic Council. Ava listens to the message in her office, surrounded by stacks of diplomatic correspondence from dozens of different worlds. As I promised, I recommended full membership for humanity in the galactic community. The vote was unanimous in favor. She smiles but keeps listening. But something unexpected happened after my presentation. The council didn't just vote to accept humanity. They voted to implement what they're calling the Earth Doctrine. The Earth Doctrine, Ava says to herself, it's a new policy requiring all member species to maintain cultural and philosophical diversity, even in the face of existential threats. No more homogenization in the name of survival. No more sacrificing what makes us who we are for the sake of efficiency. The transmission continues, and Raleigh's voice takes on a tone of amazement. Within weeks of implementing the doctrine, we started seeing changes. Art forms that had been abandoned for centuries are being revived. Languages that were considered inefficient are being taught again. And for the first time in millennia, galactic civilization is producing genuinely new ideas instead of just refining old ones. Ava leans back in her chair, processing this information. But the most remarkable change is in how we approach challenges. Instead of immediately looking for the most efficient solution, we're asking a new question: what would humans do? She laughs because she can imagine the chaos that question must be causing across the galaxy. And you know what we're discovering: the human approach, while often inefficient and sometimes dangerous, produces solutions that no one else would have thought of. Solutions that preserve what's important while still solving the problem. The message continues with specific examples. The Altarians, facing overpopulation, didn't just build more cities. They created floating gardens that turned their excess population into an asset instead of a burden. The Rigelians, dealing with a plague, didn't just develop a cure, they developed a cure that made survivors immune to an entire class of diseases. In every case, Raleigh explains the human approach required more effort, more risk, and more creativity. But it also produced results that were better than what anyone thought possible. As the message draws to a close, Raleigh's tone becomes personal again. Dr. Monroe, I want you to know that my visit to Earth didn't just change my perspective on humanity. It changed my perspective on life itself. I've stopped trying to minimize risk and started trying to maximize meaning. And I've never been happier. The transmission ends with a final thought that will stick with Ava for the rest of her life. You told me that humans refuse to choose between survival and staying true to who you are. What you didn't tell me is that by making that choice, you don't just survive. You thrive, and now, thanks to your example, so does the rest of the galaxy. 6 months after that transmission, Earth receives its first official delegation from the Galactic Council, not to evaluate humanity's worthiness, but to formally request teachers. Beings from across the galaxy who want to learn what humans have always known, that the best way to face an uncertain future is together as yourselves with hope as your guide and humanity as your compass. And Ava, she's busier than ever, but she's never been happier, because she's finally doing what she always dreamed of proving, that Earth isn't a death world after all. It's a life world, the kind of place where impossible things become possible, where diversity is strength, and where hope isn't just a feeling, but a survival strategy. They called Earth a death world. But as it turns out, it was really a training ground for something much more important than survival. It was a training ground for hope. So the next time someone tells you that something is impossible, that the odds are too great, that you should just accept defeat and move on, remember this story. Remember that somewhere in the galaxy, there's an entire civilization that learned from humanity that the most dangerous thing you can do isn't to fight impossible odds. The most dangerous thing you can do is to give up hope. And if this story inspired you, if it made you think about what it truly means to be human, then do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and let me know in the comments what impossible thing you're going to tackle next. Because the universe is full of challenges waiting for someone crazy enough to believe they can be overcome. And if humans have taught the galaxy anything, it's that crazy enough to believe just might be the most powerful force in the universe.